And Avery is wrapped up in her father's tallis, which he wore on this very bima for his bar mitzvah day. Much to celebrate Lador Vador, from generation to generation. I would like to pick up where Avery left off, talking about these two mountains described in our Torah portion. One is for blessing, and the other is for curse. Remnants of the Jewish culture that many of our grandparents and great-grandparents knew, only remnants still remain, but the superstitions of that Eastern European world, thank goodness, are fading, even from our memory. Part of that world was the belief that a person could give another person the evil eye, and it would be a serious source of immediate danger. Part of that world was the belief that a person could put a curse on another and actually cause him harm. Yiddish curses are very colorful, and no surprise, they use oftentimes Jewish humor as the sharpest weapon of all. So here are just a few examples of the endless supply of Yiddish curses. May all your teeth fall out except for one, so that you can have a toothache. May you have 100 houses, and in each house 100 rooms, and in each room 20 beds. And may fever and chills and delirium drive you from bed to bed to bed throughout the night. May you enjoy a good time with plenty to drink, so that your blood turns to whiskey and 100 bed bugs get drunk on it and dance the merzinka in your belly button. And one more just for kicks. May you be so enamored of good food that you turn into a blintz, and may your enemy turn into a cat, and may he eat you up and choke on you so that we can be rid of you both. Yes, laughter is a sharp weapon. Our Torah portion suggests, however, that blessings and curses are serious business and no laughing matter. For every one blessing listed in Parashat Ki Tavo, there are 5 frightful curses. It seems that is the way of the world. When we are blessed in just a few common ways. Blessed shall you be with your offspring. Blessed shall you be with your basket and your kneading bowl. Blessed shall you be in your comings and goings as you travel. But when we suffer in a myriad of ways. Cursed shall you be with fever and drought. Cursed shall you be with plague. Cursed shall you be with copper skies and iron earth and dust for rain. Cursed shall you be by terror, with no assurance of survival, no peace. And on the lists of hardship and heartbreak and tragedy go. This section of the Torah is referred to as tochecha, rebuke. And it is hard to take. It's uncomfortable to hear these words aloud in a sacred setting of a sanctuary, and it is certainly not befitting to hear these words on Shabbat. And so it became customary to chant these verses of curses and calamity bilachash, just in a whisper. God forbid we should attract the evil eye. In the days when superstitions ran high, it became customary for the president of the congregation or someone of confidence and stature to volunteer themselves to be the ones to have the aliyah when these verses are read. God forbid someone who is vulnerable to poverty or sickness would put himself at further risk by standing in such close proximity to these terrifying words. At Holy Blossom Temple, where we are free to choose which verses to highlight from each week's Torah portion, we can avoid reading these verses aloud altogether. But we do still study them. There is still meaning and insight to be drawn from these verses. I ask you, is the world of curses so long ago and far away? Isn't the vitriol we see on social media the very same thing? The verbal abuses and unchecked attacks that people lob freely across the internet? False accusations made out of anger or for personal gain? These can all too swiftly make headline news and ruin careers and break apart families. The gossip of middle school girls can be fierce enough to tear apart, to tear down another's self-esteem. Just one glance of the evil eye from one teenager to another across the hall can be sharp enough to break a friendship. Are these not modern-day curses that we hurl against one another? Are they not also powerful? Are they not also dangerous? But when Moses warns our ancestors with this series of curses which would befall them if they abandoned God and turned away from a life of mitzvot, he did not intend them harm, but only protection. Moses' words of rebuke were offered not to shame or to bully or to punish, but they came out of love in the hopes that the people would self-correct their ways and thrive. This is the difference between a curse and a rebuke. Like a loving parent, Moses was for the children of Israel concerned for their future. Knowing they would soon be without him to guide them, he needs to make an impression on them now. He uses both the carrot and the stick, both the honey and the sting, and prophesies both the blessings and the curses in his effort to inspire and require them to do better. This was his mitzvah to fulfill, and we find in the holiness code of the book of Leviticus that it is our mitzvah to fulfill as well. There it is written, Hocheach tochiach et amitecha, velo tisa alav chet. You shall surely reprove your kinsman and bear no guilt because of him. How do we know if we are cursing another or rebuking another? It seems there's a very fine line between the two. That verse at the center of the Torah suggests that we know whether it is a curse or a proper kind of rebuke based on whether or not there is guilt. One of the 613 commandments of our Torah is to rebuke one another, indeed, to take care enough, to take responsibility enough for another one's behavior, but to do it in a way that comes from love and concern and leaves no mark of guilt upon the giver of the rebuke and no mark of guilt for the receiver of the rebuke. 2,000 years ago, the Mishnaic sage Rabbi Tarfon asked, I wonder if there is anyone in this entire generation who knows how to accept reproof. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah retorted, and I wonder if there is anyone in this entire generation who knows how to give reproof. Together, these early rabbis acknowledged that criticism is hard to receive, and it is hard to give in a way that it can be received. But according to the later Talmudic rabbis, the stakes are very high, and this work is necessary. It could be that everything depends on our ability to give and to receive rebuke effectively. Such mutual responsibility for one another can make or break a civilization. Tractate Sanhedrin records the rabbinic debate, why was Jerusalem destroyed by the Romans in the year 70 of the Common Era? Ula teaches Jerusalem was destroyed because its inhabitants were not ashamed of one another. And Rabbi Amram, son of Rabbi Shimon, son of Abba, taught in the name of his father's teacher, Rabbi Hanina, Jerusalem was destroyed because they did not rebuke one another. Effective critique of ethical lapses can keep a society, a congregation, a family, a world from collapse. And so the common phrases of our culture today, like each to his own, different strokes for different folks, who am I to judge, better to mind my own business, all these are signs of this moral relativism so deeply ingrained in our secular culture that stand in stark contrast to this mitzvah of rebuke. Today, the mitzvah of rebuke makes us uncomfortable. Most avoid it altogether. However, our rabbis observe that when one citizen repeatedly dodges the obligation to reproach a fellow citizen, the fabric of society weakens and can begin to unravel. Much is written about how to rebuke so that it is more likely to be received. It should be given privately, Maimonides teaches. It should be given respectfully, Maimonides teaches. It should be given without shaming. It is written in the Talmud, and always out of love. In his anthology on Jewish ethics, Love Your Neighbor as Yourself, Rabbi Joseph Telushkin advises us, if you find yourself looking forward to giving that criticism, if it gives you pleasure to make that critique, then it is not the right time. Your motives are not coming from the right place, and your words are unlikely to sound loving. But if the thought of what you need to do pains you, and you wish you didn't have to do it at all, then you should proceed, because your motives are probably trustworthy, and this will come through in your words of reproach. Surprisingly, less is written about how to receive rebuke. Rabbi Simcha Zisel Ziv of Kelm, one of the early leaders of the Musar movement, asks, we are willing to pay a doctor for trying to heal our bodies. Should we be any less grateful for one who tries to improve our character? Easily said than done, I know. How can we be open to hearing loving critique from those closest to us? This is the time of year when we are to sharpen our ability to hear, to listen more carefully to the still small voice within, and also to the good voices of people we love. And beyond that, also to the guiding voice of our God. Tonight is Slichot. Tonight we will hear this beautiful medieval piyut, a liturgical poem I call attention to every year, Kihine Kachomer. We call upon God to shape us, to turn each of us into a masterpiece. Some of the metaphors are gentle. Shape us the way a potter molds a lump of clay, O God. Guide us the way a helmsman gently turns the rudder. And some are harsh. Give us form the way a mason chisels at the stone, and thrust us into the fire, O God, the way a glazier does with glass. When we sing this prayer poem tonight, we ask for loving criticism and correction. We open ourselves up to God's influence. With Slichot, we begin to remember that more than we want to be right all the time, we want to be good. We acknowledge that each of us is still a work in progress, and there is no such thing as a self-made person. And then our Slichot prayers take us one step further, and this is where I will conclude. We turn to God, who is the judge of all the earth. We recognize and declare that God is the true judge, who resides above all the noise, who is beyond all the drama. God sees it all, God knows it all, and God judges it all. As the medieval poet explains in the Unatana Tokef prayer, that haunting motif throughout the high holidays, you, O God, write and seal, you record and recount, you remember deeds long forgotten. You open the book of life, and what is written there declares itself, for it bears the signature of every human being. Slichot and the High Holy Days come to remind us that we don't need to be so judgy all the time, because God knows. Yes, in the court of law, there must be human judges to keep the rule of law. But when it comes to moral behavior and ethical deeds, we need one another to provide careful and caring rebuke. But in the court of character, when it comes time to character assessment, judgment is God's domain. And lucky for us, we believe that God is forgiving and patient and a compassionate judge. Adonai El Rachum V'Chanun. Blessed are we who are granted another year of life to self-correct, to recalibrate, to recreate ourselves, to be more and more a reflection of the divine. And blessed are we who can hear the words of Torah and the words of dear ones, teachers and role models who can guide us gently this way or that way. And blessed are we who, despite our many flaws and failings, are granted another chance to take our God-given opportunities and make our lives a treasured work of art. Ken Yehi Ratzon.